People who have been in natural disasters. What was your, oh crap, this is real moment? I was on the beach when the Boxing Day tsunami hit. Was sitting there talking with my brother when he noticed the bubbling water. He went, "That's not good." We started packing up our stuff and we were walking up the beach. I looked back and saw the water receding and just about died. Screamed, "Run! Run now!" While my brother smartly yelled, "Tsunami is coming! Run for your lives!" We started running as quick as we could. There was a woman about 20 feet in front of us with 3 kids in her arms. He grabbed one, I grabbed the other, and the 3 of us just ran. We were lucky and got high enough, but I'll never forget that sound. It was effing terrifying. Edit. For everyone saying my bro and I are heroes, thank you, but I don't agree. We did what any decent person would do. We alerted others and helped those who needed it. That's not a heroic act. We did not place ourselves in danger. We slightly varied our path to help people who needed it. If they were 500 meters to our side, we would not have gone to help. It was fortuitous they were where we could help the best. Next story. I grew up poor on the Gulf, so we lived through a lot of the hurricanes. Our worst were Katrina, Rita, and Ike. The scariest part about them is how quickly they build up. You have 3 to 4 days of worrying, and then suddenly, at 3 a.m., your parents pull you out of bed in order to pack because of the mandatory evacuation. So that was always the first, oh crap, scrambling into a cramped car in the dead of night, with just your vital documents and as much food and emergency supplies as you can fit, not knowing what will happen. Second, oh crap, evacuating. Even at 3 a.m., millions of people are evacuating, and that's millions of cars backed up on every single road. You can't waste gas on air conditioning, so it's boiling hot and cramped in the dead of a Texas summer. You'd move maybe 10 feet in an hour. The roads were so clogged that I remember people getting out of their cars and playing frisbee on the interstate. If you're close to the hurricane, it's even more terrifying. It sounds like the sky is getting ripped open. We were lucky to have family to stay with, but that doesn't stop the destruction. I remember watching CNN when Ike made landfall, realizing the flooded area and collapsed buildings looked familiar, and asking my mom, "Wait, isn't that our neighborhood?" You never want to see your house on CNN. Third, oh crap, coming back. It always looks like those post-apocalyptic movies. Houses ripped apart, streets flooded, trees torn out of the ground or splitting open buildings. Most of the dead are in their houses, but sometimes the bodies were washed into the rivers and streets. By the way, graves that float upwards in floods. The cemeteries were always torn apart, with caskets and corpses thrown everywhere and rotting in the wet sun. After Rita, because we were too poor to evacuate, we lived at home for a short while. No electricity besides the generator, no running water, no emergency services, living off MREs and boiled street water. Wild hogs and alligators prowled everywhere, chased out of their usual homes by the storm. And I remember playing in the huge felled trees in the streets. Lots of people kept watch with guns to chase off looters. It felt like living in a zombie movie. Eventually, FEMA would show up, and you'd wait in line forever for your ration of bottled water and MREs while they tried to reconstruct everything. So that was the third oh crap, trying to figure out how you move on from there after your area has been torn to shreds. It was odd growing up and realizing not all kids understood the FEMA markings for how many bodies were found in a house. I know that should have been obvious, but FEMA was such a normal part of my childhood that it never occurred to me. Next story. Black Saturday. Huge effing bushfire that killed nearly 200 people, injured 400, and destroyed 3,000 plus buildings, including over 2,000 homes in Victoria, Australia in February 2009. Some of the people that died or were injured were people I knew or knew of. We were a bit stupid. We'd moved from an area where bushfires were very rare and the yearly disaster of choice was floods. So we didn't really have a plan in case of bushfire, which, if you live in a fire-prone area, for the love of God, make one. So we weren't listening to the radio, we weren't packed to go, and we didn't have an escape plan. The, "oh, this is real" moment was when I was standing on top of a hill, overlooking the paddocks. The sky was black and orange, and in the distance, I could see this line of orange, and I went, "oh, that's pretty close." Then we started hosing everything down because it was too late to run. The fire got within 5 to 10 minutes of us, and my friend's property was partially burnt. Went up to their shed before the wind changed. Next story. Right, the Joplin, Missouri tornado. Came out of my then brother-in-law's basement. Saw smoke above the trees. Saw a crapload of emergency vehicles pass by from the city next door. Tried to call my family. No reception. Texted my mom. Hey, you guys didn't die in a tornado, did you? No response. Then, 10 minutes later, wham! My phone starts lighting up with texts, with pictures, with news. I wanted to drive to my parents, maybe see what I could do to help, but my in-laws insisted we stay with them. They didn't want us anywhere near the damage. My sisters, who were closer to the area where I hit, went out looking for people until the emergency crews came on the scene. The crap they were texting, they dug out some seriously damaged people, some dead people. My dad called a few hours later, told me he was called to work to assess damage at his plant and to hunt for some missing guys. He found them, drowned in a pipe outside, caught by the weather. All of it seemed unreal, like it wasn't really happening. It wasn't until the next day, when my in-laws finally relented and let my then-husband and I go into town so I could see my folks, that the reality smacked me. The damage, it was effing unreal. A town I graduated high school and college in just split in two. The center, a jumble of lumber and debris. It looked like a flattened garbage dump. Every landmark, gone. And then there is the bizarre crap, the crap that showed how strong the winds were. Metal siding wrapped around poles, semi-trucks at a trucking facility knocked over like dominoes on one side of the lot, and on the other tossed around like crap was thrown from a kid's toy chest. Cars on top of other cars, debris jammed through surviving walls, an apartment building that looked like someone took a knife to it and sliced it in half. That's the crap that made it real. And even now, though I have the memories and I can still see pictures online and the streets look vastly different from before the storm, it still doesn't seem quite like it happened. That amount of damage is just, I think the brain sort of keeps you from taking it all in when it's a place you called home. Next story. I just moved to the beach in South Carolina about 4 months ago. About 3 weeks after moving down, Hurricane Matthew was heading towards the state. Initially, I didn't plan on leaving, but the most astonishing part for me was that 2 days before the storm, the lines to get into gas stations were miles long. Like, it took around 2 hours for people to get gas. I decided to leave the next day, and the state government decided to reverse both lanes of I-26. Nothing is freakier than seeing both lanes of the interstate going in the same direction. Even though I didn't stay through the storm, just experiencing this made me feel like the situation was completely effed. Yeah, I myself spent some time living on the East Coast, and those evacuations, it really does feel like you're living in like post-apocalyptic, like The Last of Us type world, where like all the roads are shut down going in one direction. They're just literally forcing you out. It does indeed feel like a movie, so I feel this one. Next story. Hurricane Ike in Galveston and Houston in September 2008. The Wikipedia page actually downplays its devastation. I lived off of I-45, which the eye of the hurricane followed very closely. My oh crap moment, when the eye hit us. I took a smoke break from trying to sop up rain that was blowing in through the cracks of the windows and doors. Not large cracks, just very strong wind. In the eye of the storm, it was eerily quiet compared to the howling winds that had blown down every neighborhood fence. I knew that my smoke break was over, and that the eye was nearly past, when I saw a 30-foot tall tree coming down the road towards me, roots dragging the ground. I lived with a cop at the time, and had several friends who were EMS and firefighters. Despite the media blackouts, they told me for 2 weeks afterwards they were pulling 50 to 100 bodies out of the water every day around Galveston Island. Where I lived at the time, power was out for 3 weeks after. Gas stations were dry, grocery stores were rationing, and only letting in a dozen or so people at a time. An illegal curfew was implemented. Cops would pull you over just for being on the road. My cop roommate had left me with a shotgun to protect the house while he was on duty during the storm and the day after. 3 guys broke into my neighbor's backyard and ours. The fences were blown down, and tried to steal the neighbor's generator, and smash the back window to our house. I ended up firing at and hitting one of them, but they all got away. Supposedly, there were riots in some places. I realize we were lucky where we were at. Whole neighborhoods had been wiped clean from the face of the earth. You could hardly tell they were ever there at all. I was born during Hurricane Alicia, and took my driver's test during Allison, evacuated for Rita, survived Ike, and now I don't live on the coast. Next story. The 7.5 Kaikoura earthquake in November, though it ended up not being too bad for us. It hit at about 1 in the morning on a Monday, and I was grumpy because it woke me up. I tried going back to sleep, but it kept waking me up, like someone was roughly shaking me awake. The bed was getting thrown about. It felt like lying on a trampoline when someone else was jumping on it, and there was a long, low rumble. We knew it was a really big one when, after scouring Twitter, news sites, and radio, we decided to start walking towards the hills at 1:30 a.m. with our tiny dog in our arms because there is a tsunami coming. Tsunami sirens are not a happy sound. It ended up being 2 feet high though, so we would have been fine. Next story. San Francisco, 1989. My boyfriend and I were in our apartment and we felt an earthquake. We both are native Canadians and we're not fazed at all. We went and stood in the doorway and waited for it to stop, but it just kept going, and after a couple of seconds, the power went out and the earthquake kept going. We realized this was not a normal quake, and we looked at each other in fear. There was not much damage at our house because we were in Bernal Heights, which is on bedrock. Our neighbor went out to his car to listen to the radio, and we could hear it. It said the cyberstructure had collapsed, and I was very confused. I did not know much about computers at that time, and I thought it was very strange that there was a cyberstructure, which was an actual physical thing, that could collapse during an earthquake. Later I found out that this was the Cypress structure, which was a freeway overpass. When the earthquake started, we were watching the show Small Wonder, which is about a little girl robot. It was a terrible, terrible show, and we were laughing at how stupid it was. As we were standing in the doorway, scared that we might die, I remember thinking, if I die, the last thing I've done was watch that stupid plastic sitcom about a little girl robot, so I was glad I didn't die. You know, embarrassing as that may be, there are far, far worse things that you could be doing in your last moments, just saying. Next story. My family lost everything in the little-known flood of Baton Rouge, Louisiana last year that the Red Cross called the worst U.S. disaster since Hurricane Sandy. In mid-August, it began raining. Then it rained some more, got more powerful, and didn't stop for days. There was talk that the local rivers were going to crest and cause some pretty serious flooding. We lived somewhat close to the Amite River, but our neighbors said our neighborhood hadn't flooded in over 100 years. Local news said that the nearby high school may get a little bit of water inside from the rising river. We thought we had a couple days to plan on how we were going to shelter in place because of the weather forecast. On the 13th of August, I woke up, walked outside, and started walking toward the direction of the river. Some of the lower areas were collecting water, but there was no standing water anywhere near my house or even my neighborhood. I went back home and told my wife we should probably get some supplies in case this got serious. Maybe we should even pack a car in case we need to leave, but I'm sure there will be nothing to worry about. About 30 minutes into slowly packing, there's a loud banging on my front door. It's my wife's cousin. I open the door and she says, "What are you doing? Get out of the house." I look behind her and my entire yard is underwater, and the water line is only about a half-inch front going over my doorstep and into my house. I was floored. The river wasn't supposed to crest until the next day. I thought we had more time. I yelled at my wife, "We have to get out of the house, now." We packed up both our cars in about 10 minutes with only our most precious memories. Everything else we had built in a 10-year marriage was left behind. We evacuated about 5 miles east away from the river to my wife's grandmother's. After being there for about an hour, someone comes to the front door and says, "You guys need to get out. The river is coming." Sure enough, her yard was flooding. We evacuated a second time in as many hours to her cousin's house even further east. After only an hour, we were told again that the river was on the way and we had to leave. We evacuated 3 times that day. I drove back through the flooded waters at some point because we left our cat. Then I got back to our house and I sloshed through knee-deep water filled with trash and our waterlogged belongings. Got the cat safely though. When it was all over, it was a surreal feeling. We were homeless and lost everything that didn't fit in one car. The other car got left behind during one of the evacuations and flooded. Oh, and I haven't even gotten to the "this is real" moment. That moment didn't come until about a week after the flood while we were living in a tiny room at my sister-in-law's house. My wife, me, 3-year-old daughter, dog, cat, and fish. After about a week, the shell shock wore off, and I thought, this is our new life now. This is real. I'm so glad we have each other and no one was hurt. We're still homeless, living at the moment at my mother-in-law's house, but we hope to buy a new home soon. Next story. I was in Michigan during the ice storm of 2013. Most of my city went without power for a week, with some areas going as long as 12 days. I was without power for 9. It's not unusual to lose power in Michigan. A lot of our power lines are old and need replacing, especially in winter. It was a Saturday night when the power went out, so I just piled on extra blankets onto my bed and figured power would be back on in the morning. That exact thing had happened at least 10 times in the past to me that I can remember, and it's probably happened even more times than that, and I just never realized it because I slept through it. It wasn't until the next morning, when I woke up to a house that was about 50 degrees Fahrenheit inside with no power on yet, that I realized crap was getting real. I ended up having to use my fireplace for those 9 days and making a blanket bed on the floor near it to keep from freezing. My pipes actually did freeze. I had to slowly warm those up before I could use them. At the coldest, I think my kitchen, the farthest room from my fireplace, dropped down to just barely above freezing. Next story. I still remember the Northridge earthquake a while back. Lived near the epicenter, apparently. Woke up to the sound of clanging dishes. Only this time, everything was moving. Violently. It felt like forever. It was less than a minute in real life. And when it stopped, there was this eerie calm, aside from all the car alarms going off. So this is another one that hits home because I lived in LA during the Northridge earthquakes and I slept through the whole thing. And so I literally went to bed one night and when I woke up, everything was devastated. Don't ask how I was able to sleep through. I guess it had just been a long day, but yeah, that was a doozy. Next story. When I was a teenager, I went outside during a tornado warning to look around when it got quiet, then looked up and saw the clouds circling like water around a drain directly over my house. Apparently, that particular funnel cloud was retracting, hence the break in storm noise as it passed overhead. A very humbling sight. Next story. Hurricane Sandy for me. I have so many stories to tell. That entire month felt like living in a recently occupied war zone, and I was on Long Island, which, for those that don't know, is not only a coastal region, but a coastal region completely surrounded by water, the Atlantic to boot, and barely above sea level. You can imagine the results. It was hell of a time. I knew it was horrible. I thought repeatedly the whole time that it was a load of complete crap. Unlucky crap, the worst kind. But what really got me was when I was sleeping on the cement floor in my basement. The rest of the house was cold as ice, and I turned on a battery-powered radio for some noise. Every station was playing little infomercials about donations and relief efforts, about Sandy, inspirational speeches with government officials, about Sandy, heartfelt stories, interviews with survivors, the official voices of celebrities calling for the listener to have a soul and help. All of this, usually accompanied by sad music. Home by Philip Phillips is one I remember vividly. And at that moment, in the second week living in a leaking, powerless, heatless, hole-riddled house on a ripped-up street littered by fallen wires and trees, I understood that the rest of the country and a bit more actually pitied us. I'd never been pitied before. It felt bizarre, so I turned the radio off. Next story. I was still living in Peru when the 2007 earthquake happened. It was late afternoon, and lazy 8-year-old me was sleeping in the living room, when I was woken up by my dog barking at the shaking window next to me. Now, small, quick tremors are fairly common in Peru, especially in the coastal regions, so I dismissed it and tried to calm my dog so I could fall asleep again. I had walked 4 steps from the couch to grab her when the entire wall-length window shattered in front of me. Huge, sharp chunks falling right into the couch I had been lying in just seconds ago. Fully woken up, I could hear what sounded like a million car alarms ringing from the ground and see towers wobbling side to side. My parents were still at work, and I was alone in a effing 10th floor flat with a panicking dog running circles around me. Now, I don't know how I managed to get myself together. I lifted my giant English cocker in my arms and ran into the emergency stairs. Just ran and ran until I could see some streetlights, since the damn building had no emergency lights and everything was dark. When I finally crossed the lobby's doors, I could see the pavement below me cracking and entire trees shaking from their roots up. I stayed in the streets for about an hour until my parents arrived. I later learned I was the only person in our building that left. Our neighbors took the elevators and got stuck, and those who didn't stayed inside praying for safety. It was a miracle none of them got injured. However, others were not so lucky. Next story. I think I'm in labor. My wife gave me that news while Hurricane Gloria was whipping the hell out of Long Island. Fortunately, it was a long labor because we couldn't leave for the hospital till the storm calmed down. The worst of it was when they returned home, because we didn't have power for the first 2 weeks of our first child's life. Next story. I live in the Gatlinburg, Tennessee area. We recently had some devastating wildfires. The whole day, I kept telling myself everything was going to be fine. There's no way the fire can get from the chimney tops, a local mountain peak and popular hiking trail, to downtown. I was underestimating the wind and how dry it was. It got real very, very fast. I started hearing about fire that had spread to 2 creeks in Cherokee Orchard. These areas are directly next to the city proper, but I'm a town over, so I should be safe. Then I heard fire trucks approaching my house, and we were told by the fire department that we had to leave. Oh crap, this is real. Videos started coming in of the mountains surrounding Gatlinburg. Everything was on fire. The city center was on fire, but everything else was burning. It looked like magma flows on the mountains. Oh crap, this is real. And then the news started talking about people trapped in a hotel by fire. My dad was in that hotel. Everyone made it out of the hotel, but it didn't look good for a while. It felt even more real the next day when I heard that they had found 3 bodies, then 5, then 10. They're still finding remains. I think the last official count was 14, and it will be higher. When I saw National Guard helicopters and trucks, it felt a little more real. And now that I think about it, I still don't think it feels entirely real. Nothing like this has ever happened here. Thank you for reading, if anyone did. Next story. Been in a few hurricanes and 2 tornadoes. First tornado, I didn't know any better. Was playing Monopoly with family at my grandma's in an all-glass room. We didn't notice until it was about over. The house behind us were all wrecked. We got really lucky. Second tornado was driving to the Talladega Spring Race in college on spring break. The weather was really crappy. I didn't know how crappy until we stopped at Waffle House and they had a TV going telling everyone to stay off the roads. Pre-hurricane, it was almost always the same. Everyone is going everywhere. Getting gas. Believe me, you want a full tank. Supplies, raiding groceries for food and booze, cleaning out pot dealers, and so forth. All of this is happening on a clear sky, hot day with a nice stiff wind that's welcome in the heat. During the storm, unless you're in the crap, it's pretty manageable. The problem is outside of the people getting the direct hit. You don't know where the crap is going to be. I'll use Isaac for example. I was in Baton Rouge and it was nothing. 40 miles south and it was hell. Same with Katrina. Baton Rouge didn't get it that bad. After the storm, you're drunk, no AC, it's miserably hot, and you're helping neighbors clear stuff off the road. It's worth getting out of town just to avoid this. The nights are miserable. Next story. I rode through Hurricane Rita when I was like 10-ish, Beaumont, Texas. I told my dad that I wanted to see what gale force winds were like. Being 10, I fell asleep before the fun started. My father woke me up and told me to go look outside. I watched it destroy the effing fence. 10-year-old me thought that was real as F. I then spent the next week repairing said fence with the dad. 2 weeks without power and learning how to put things back together. All in the house was fine, just light damage. Was an excellent experience overall. Next story. This will get buried, but oh well. I was on holiday in Taipei when Typhoon Dewan hit. We were told to be back at our hotels around 6 p.m. when it was scheduled to hit, and everyone seemed pretty chill about it. Anyway, we decided to not let this ruin our holiday, so we thought we would go out for a while and then head back to the hotel around 4 p.m. So it hits 4, and we're in an underground mall in the subway station that was about 2 stops away from our hotel. We planned to walk from the subway to the hotel as it was about a 20-minute walk. Anyway, my "oh crap, this is real" moment was when we surfaced from the tube station and 2 of my friends, who were walking in front of me and my other friend, disappeared. When we got to the top of the steps, we could see why. The typhoon had hit harder and earlier than expected. Our friends had essentially been blown out of the entrance of the tube station and were nowhere to be seen. We were quickly swept out, but managed to grab a hold of a nearby statue to get to the door of a nearby shopping center, where security let us inside. We could see lampposts swaying so much in the mind that we thought we were going to snap and stuff flying around everywhere. Cue a frantic bout of trying to contact my other friends. Eventually, we found them at another door of the shopping center and managed to persuade the guard to let them in. We spent a while huddled together in the basement of the shopping center with a bunch of other people until the fire brigade came and tied a rope between the entrance of the mall and the entrance of the subway and escorted us across it one by one. Never been so glad to get back to my hotel. TLDR, got stuck in a typhoon, friends got blown away, got stuck in a mall, found friends, rescued by the fire brigade. Next story. I was visiting my cousin in LA, and while I was sleeping, I was woken by an earthquake and I sat right up. The whole room shook for like 15 seconds, which was a surreal experience. After it was over, I took a bit to calm myself and got out of bed to check on my cousin. He was still lying in bed and mumbled to me that it was nothing and told me to go back to sleep. I instantly felt like a coward. Next story. I've been in 3 natural disasters in my life, and I remember my oh crap moment for each of them. The first was in 1984, and I'm only 10 years old. I'm walking home from school in North Carolina when I start getting pelted by softball-sized hail. I'd been told in school that this was a sign of a major tornado, so I did what I'd been told and made myself the lowest thing in the area. In all honesty, I probably would have taken less damage if I'd just run to my house. Maybe not. It turns out that an F4 tornado had touched down just a few miles down the road, but I lay there getting pelted until the storm passed, like I'd been told to. The second was in 1989. I was only 15 when Hurricane Hugo passed over my head. The power was out, no lights, no news, pre-internet. I'm up on the trunk of a tree that's currently on the roof of my house, operating a chainsaw for the first time in my life, trying to cut it loose to prevent further damage as the eye of the bloody hurricane passed over. F you, Dad, for making me do that. This was the event that made me love having a natural gas stove. Even though power was out for days, we were able to make hot coffee for the entire neighborhood, cook hot meals for the neighborhood, and have hot water for baths. The last one was in 2000. I'm driving home to River Oaks, Texas. I'm taking a ride off of Belknap onto Jocksboro Highway, and the sky turns yellow. If you don't know, this is a sign of severe storm activity and/or a tornado. I floored it, getting home just in time for the tornado to touch down. Part of the Bank of America sign landed in our yard. We were pretty much unable to leave our house for 3 days due to downed trees, damage to electrical lines, and blocked roads. This is just what I remember now. Forgive the formatting. I'm quite drunk and on mobile. Next story. Nothing too serious, but this is the closest I've ever been. I was dicking around on my Xbox while my wife played on her computer in the other room. It was just a normal, hot-as-balls Midwestern July afternoon, but as cliche as it sounds, something just felt very wrong suddenly. I noticed it seemed like it was too dark outside for as early as it was, and it's eerily calm, too. I idly pulled out my phone to check the weather radar and confirm my suspicions. I'm alarmed to discover a classic hook echo near the leading edge of a severe supercell that's heading directly for our little town. Hook echoes are a strong indication of rotation within a thunderstorm. I'd seen quite a few severe storms over the years, but I knew from what I could interpret from radar data that this one was likely different. I then hastily looked out at our other apartment window to the northwest and see the sky is almost jet effing black. A few moments later, the sirens go off. We pack up our cats and haul ass to a family member's house because the apartment complex doesn't have a real basement. It hadn't even reached us yet, but just being outside in close proximity to this behemoth of a storm was otherworldly. The storm rumbled continuously, loud, broken only by other more pronounced cracks of thunder from lightning striking closer by, but it never stopped. This electrical storm began to put on one hell of a light show as it grew nearer, and the lights began to come on at 5 in the afternoon. When we eventually retreated to the basement, all hell was breaking loose outside. I couldn't see much through the egress windows, but it sounded like a goddamn freight train was rolling through the neighborhood for like an hour. We ended up being fairly lucky. Overall damage was negligible, downed trees, broken windows, and such. However, not even 1 mile to our north, a trailer park and a huge storage lot for tractor trailers was completely demolished, along with a few outbuildings. Next story. Tornado. Since our house was near train tracks and an airport, and it wasn't even a tornado season, I didn't place the rumbling noise as something out of place. I was headed upstairs to the second story when it clicked. The resonance wasn't dissipating as a plane would. It was ominously steady. Another family member was there, and I asked if they had heard a siren, which would alert everyone. Then all the lights went out. We booked it down the stairs in the darkness as the noise droned on and things hit the house. We made it to the basement. The tornado touched down before and after our street, destroyed some businesses, rained glass and debris on our neighborhood, but spared the houses. We sat around without power the rest of the night while police rerouted cars from the highway down our street and back onto the highway. Ton of people who must have come to gawk, but weren't allowed into the area. Turns out, one of the first things the tornado sucked up was the city's tornado siren. Next story. St. Patrick's Day earthquake in Cali back in 2014. 5.4 earthquake early in the morning. I was in the shower and got thrown out. Took the shower curtains down with me and hit my head on the tile. The shaking went on for about 20 seconds. When the shaking stopped, I remember yelling at my fiance, "Grab Grover!" guinea pig, over and over again. Cali is overdue for the massive earthquake, and I thought the big one was going to hit. We waited for a good 20 minutes, but nothing came. I had to tape my forehead, and holy balls, Grover was shaking. Next story. 2004 Christmas tsunami, and I was staying in the Rasa Sayang/Golden Sands in Penang. The earthquake woke me up, while I had a massive hangover. Fine, I've been through earthquakes before, no problem. Go down to the beachfront pool area, relaxing, having a Bloody Mary and some food. Then people start moving towards the beach, so I go to have a look. There's a massive chunk taken out of the horizon. We just watched it for like 10 minutes. The sea started to retract, and the fishermen boosted out to sea without saying anything. People uneasily moved away, but continued to watch. The moment I saw the speed the sea was coming back, I knew crap was about to get real. I and everyone around me ran. A girl got caught, and her partner managed to snatch her back out. Reactions of a mongoose. It's only luck or a miracle for me that our section of the beach happened to draw the full wave further down. I got back to the pool area and turned to see the wave had begun to turn. It still made it to the pools, though. The fishing village, 200 meters down the beach, was demolished. They were pulling bodies out of the water for the next couple of weeks. Next story. Well, usually when we get a tornado warning, it's in either the northern or southern part of our county. We're dead center. A few years ago, I'm watching the storm reports come in from the Weather Service. My dad is watching TV, when we both see a tornado warning lit up for our part of the county, and decided, F it, let's go outside, because we're both total loony bins. The twister that had touched down to our southwest had lifted and reformed about a mile or two due north of the house, and was just coming down to destroy the first of many trees in its path. I want to say it was an EF1, first twister I've ever seen in real life. Seeing that effort come down out of the clouds was my, oh crap, this is real moment. Next story. Not as bad as some of the others, but I'm a reporter and I live in an area affected by Hurricane Matthew. The morning after the hurricane passed over our area, I'm in North Carolina, I was honestly feeling like it didn't live up to the hype. It was a bunch of rain and not much else. It was a mild inconvenience at best from my vantage point. Then I went to work. While exploring the inner city and some areas affected by flash flooding, I saw a guy carrying chunks of carpet out of his house. I asked him what happened and he invited me inside. The first thing that hit me was the stench. Wet carpet and early onset of mold is not a pleasant mixture. His house had gone from totally dry to knee-deep in water in an instant. His wife, who only had one leg, had to be taken to a shelter by fire truck. A small pump she'd been given by her doctor to administer some medicine she needed was ruined as well. While he was giving me a tour of his house, his friends were dumping buckets of water into a trash can, then carrying it out to the street to empty. He told me that his landlord had insured the house, meaning it could be repaired, but everything inside, this dude's whole life, wasn't covered. When we walked outside, I looked down the street and there were 5 or 6 more people just like him. When the rivers here crested, they cut our county in half, meaning the only way to get to shelters and to do stories south of the river, we had to beg the National Guard to give us rides on the back of Deuce and a halves across the flooded highway. I don't know that I'll ever forget the month of October 2016 as long as I live. Next story. A ton of my family members who live closer to the coast than I do came to stay at our house to ride out Hurricane Ike. The outer bands hit with some wind and rain, and it just felt like a big party until we all went to bed, and I woke up to find the electricity out and the windows loudly vibrating and rattling from 110 mph winds. I had to share my bed with 2 cousins, and it got really hot with no AC, so we were just laying there on a bare mattress, and I basically couldn't sleep the rest of the night. It was terrifying. I just remember wanting it to be over. Walking around the neighborhood looking at all the damage the next day was cool, though. Next story. This was my family's experience during the tornado that ruined my hometown in 2008. Growing up in the Midwest, tornadoes aren't that uncommon, and when bad weather rolls through, you usually sit on the front porch and wait to see if you get lucky enough to see any action. Well, that day we did get lucky enough. I remember even as the winds bared down on us and it felt like my brains were being sucked out of my ears by a freight train, thinking there's no way a tornado was over the top of us. It got real in stages, like when we had to crawl out of the cooler over a flipped car that had replaced the former bar top, and when we pulled seriously injured people out of rubble that used to be their houses. Directly after it was like some crap out of a war movie. Sirens were blaring, fires, injured people screaming under houses, just general chaos. I remember the most eerie thing of it all was when I was walking across town to my former house and got totally lost. I had lived there my entire life, and with no landmarkers, I had no idea where I was in my half-mile walk home. The gravity of the situation really hit hard when that night, when the town was to be evacuated, my dad picked us up and it was showing on the news, and he made a silly comment about it must have been pretty bad, huh? As we're sitting there shell-shocked. Next story. The Loma Prieta quake in Santa Cruz. I wasn't old enough to remember, but my parents describe watching the road we lived on crack completely down the center line for miles. Our house was an old Victorian, and it stood solid through the shaking while we watched giant clouds of dust fly off the mountains from the shaking. Pictures of those dust clouds are so intense to see. It's like a giant animal shaking itself off after a dusty day. Now I live in a house 30 yards from the San Andreas fault line. Not my smartest house purchase. Next story. I've lived in Florida for just about 2.5 years, and my first serious storm was Hurricane Matthew. I was used to people blowing off the little hurricanes that threatened to blow through, so I wasn't freaked out until the day it was due to hit. I was working a shift, and the reality of the storm slowly dawned on me as I tended to the mad rush of people buying supplies for evacuating their pets. My oh crap moment came when one of the managers, who's from Puerto Rico, stopped saying he was going to spend the hurricane grilling out and started saying that it was a storm to be afraid of. Next story. I was in Christchurch during the 2011 February 22nd earthquake. Imagine, if you will, waking up at 4ish a.m. by violent shaking. Not your normal small earthquake, the kind you know. This is something deeper, sharper, and something you automatically know is serious. You wake up under your desk, having scrambled under the nearest solid object before fully conscious. Then everyone piles out, stands around, and waits for it to be okay. That wasn't February 22nd, that was September 4th, 2010. What followed was months of rebuilding, of political talk, of watching the closed buildings and clearing rubble, of insurance claims and getting your life back together. Nobody died, but that's just our building code. 5 months of being on edge. Then, just as the new year is starting properly and schools and universities are getting back on, just at lunchtime, a jolt. Not a slow sway, but hard, aggressive. A peak vertical acceleration of 2G. You're awake anyway, braced in your doorway as the entire flat throws around you. You hope, as bad as it felt, that it's going to be okay. That it's just going to be damage and a few days of aftershock tension. Then you turn on the TV. Earthquake injuries and deaths had always been a foreign thing that occurred in other countries with bad buildings, but the TV and radio were fast. Images, shock, and horror from just a couple of kilometers away in the center of the city. Building fronts fallen down, people trapped and crying, bloody and screaming. The shaking had stopped, but it wasn't over. The city got shook to bits. People were dead. Buildings collapsed. 185 dead. Days without water supply. Some places weeks. Power was out for days and weeks for people. Nearly 6 years on, we're not rebuilt. Parts of the middle of town are simple gravel lots. The cathedral is a gaping urban ruin and red tape wrapping. Disasters are one thing, but how can it mess with your mind is another. We had a serious earthquake a month and a bit ago that basically cut a major town off from the rest of the country. It was felt up and down the islands. This one went on for multiple minutes. It was soft and rolly in my city, which meant it was far away, but it kept on going. All I could think of was those poor souls near the middle. I know we live on shaky isles, and we have building codes in preparation, civil defense and the Earthquake Commission, that people in a disaster are good people who help out, who are charitable, and who are kind. But there lurks something at the back of your mind, something that you never really remember day to day, that it could go all so sideways so quickly. I'm 100 kilometers or so from the middle of the airplane fault, the source of the island I live on and its mountain ranges. The fault is overdue to rupture, and has about 9 meters of pent-up movement. So, user TechNid, what was my "oh crap, this is real" moment? 22nd of February 2011 at 12:51 p.m., 5 months after an earthquake, after the middle of town had been gutted and crap ruined, and then it all came again, and worse, and this time lethal. To people who go through these kinds of events, kia kaha. Stay strong. Next story. I was going to college in Wisconsin, working as a delivery driver/cashier in Northern Illinois during the blizzard of 2011. I had to drive to work the first day of it, which was normally a 25-minute drive. I left extra early because I knew it would be snowing a lot, but I was not prepared for that. I had my "oh crap" moment pretty much as soon as I hit the highway I would take to commute. It was effing terrifying. It was bowing so hard you could barely see anything unless it was like a few feet in front of you. I've never white-knuckled my steering wheel so bad. I swear my fingers were losing feeling because I was cutting off circulation. A part of me felt like just going back and saying I couldn't come in, but I really needed the money and I was stupid, so I decided to keep on going. That 25-minute drive ended up taking about an hour and a half, and I was chain-smoking cigarettes the entire time because I was so nervous and scared. I finally get off my exit and start heading to the restaurant. Then I get a call from my boss telling me to hold off on because they might not need a driver or cashier that night. I ended up going to Target and killing an hour before I got another call back saying I didn't have to come in. My bosses always forgot I wasn't from that town, so they forgot that I actually had to commute. I was pissed, but there was nothing I could really do aside from head back home and hopefully get there before it started getting dark. Yeah, I can see how that would be annoying, but ultimately, your safety and well-being should take precedence over, a minor commuting convenience, so I hear you though. Next story. Hurricane Sandy. Leaving work that Friday, I work in downtown NYC, thinking, this is being blown out of proportion. Came home, Jim Cantor's reporting from Battery Park, aka downtown NYC. As they say, if you see Cantor in your area, get the F out ASAP. There are loads of stories about 9/11, but my oh crap moment was seeing fighter jets scrambling overhead. The song "This Is Not America" came to mind. Next story. Walking down the streets of Brooklyn on 9/11, coming from the courthouse downtown with other jurors, we walked along 3rd Avenue as ash and paper and stuff were falling into the street. The gray cloud was over us. We got to this short bridge over the Gowanus Canal, and that was the first chance any of us had to see the skyline of Lower Manhattan. It just wasn't real, but now it was. It wasn't some TV or movie special effect. It had happened. Next story. Valentine's Day earthquake, Christchurch, New Zealand, 2016. I was visiting, decided to go out by myself, had a coffee at the mall, and finished it up. Things started shaking. I'd been in small earthquakes before, so I was okay. Then it got worse, but I'm still thinking, how bad is this? Is this a 2 or a 7? The ground was moving up and down. I looked around and saw people getting under tables. That's when I went, oh crap, and jumped under a table. I've never been so terrified in my life. I held onto the table leg while I jolted up and down. I cried hysterically as it got worse and worse. I didn't even have time to wonder if I would die because the fear was stopping thoughts. I just had feelings. And the worst part, when it stopped, everyone was gone. They had all evacuated the mall. I was left crying under a table. My partner called and told me to go outside. I did, and no one cared. I was terrified, and they were all so normal because they were used to it. It's effed me up a lot. I found the only other crying person, and we stuck together. Turns out it was a 5.7, and the building I was in had collapsed last time, which is why everyone else left. F that crap. Next story. I was 3 days into a 20-day trek in Nepal when the 2015 earthquake happened. I could feel my knees buckling like I was on a trampoline as it happened. Your body goes through a weird moment as this happens, like your legs are yelling to your brain, "Brain, the ground is moving. Do something." And your brain replies, "Come on, legs. The ground doesn't move like that. It's the ground." And since the two of them can't decide, they freeze and panic. It feels like you're imminently about to die. Nobody knew the full extent of the disaster until a week later, when we were acclimatizing to the altitude in a small village. When the signal finally came in and the BBC came on, you could feel the air get sucked out of the room as everyone realized it was far worse than anyone had guessed. I spent the next 3 months in the country afterwards, partly since the airline straight up canceled my flight, and had some pretty wild experiences afterwards. I saw the worst of, as well as the best and truest moments of humanity during that time. Crap effed me up for a while, but in the end, it really proved to myself a lot about who I am and my own character. I had an incredible opportunity to help out, and that experience inspired me to pull out of trade school when I got home and refocus my life towards a career with NGOs and international aid. That and going back to Nepal. Those mountains are incredible. Next story. Sorry for the length, got a bit carried away with the typing. My house went underwater in the Queensland floods in 2011. I live on a street almost a mile away from the river, several meters above the water level. We were warned about flooding in the area, potential flash floods, etc. Fairly usual for a Queensland summer. This time, however, there had been a lot of rain and flash flooding further north, which eventually filtered down to the river. My younger brother was getting nervous and thought we should evacuate. We spent hours trying to dissuade him. The water had never gotten to less than 1 to 2 meters away from our street level. We live across from a catchment, so we can easily see the water levels during heavy rain. After a few more hours, the water levels were getting much higher than we'd seen before, and thought it best we move our cars to higher ground, just in case it got to street level. Later, we moved a lot of furniture and electronics upstairs, just in case it got a few inches in the bottom floor. Eventually, we decided to leave. The water was getting close to the street level, which only meant another foot from reaching our bottom floor. We left to spend the night with family who live in a neighborhood close by. We had heard that the water had risen further, but had no idea how far, as it was dark, and we couldn't see anything from our cousin's house. The next morning, there was no power. We thought the flood must have affected the power elsewhere and blacked out a large area. We left their house to go check on ours, only to see neighbors grabbing bags of clothes and other items and heading down the road. That was my first oh crap moment. Our cousin's house was at the end of a long road, fairly elevated, but with a dip in the middle of the road leading to the rise. This dip at its lowest was about 1 to 2 meters underwater, and some good Samaritans were helping evacuate people from what had essentially become a small suburban island via dinghy. We got across this new river and met up with some friends who lived near us, just up the hill from our house, who picked us up in their 4x4. We had to take back streets as several of the lower main roads were underwater, but we managed to get home. My biggest oh crap moment was when we finally got to see our house. There's a high school behind our house, which is at the base of this large hill, with an elevated sports oval right behind our house. The water, at its height, was about 2 inches from being level with the oval. We walked across it to survey our house. Seeing water lapping at the bedroom windows on the second floor of our house was the most surreal experience I've ever had. This may not seem like a huge amount to some people. Floods happen and water rises sometimes. However, this particular flood was recorded at reaching 9.4 meters, 64 feet, at its peak. Basically, if I look out my windows right now, I can't even see a body of water in any direction. To have it come up that high overnight just blew my mind.